Today is March 17th, 2018, and it's 217 days until the Vancouver municipal election. Cambie Report is the new Vancouver politics podcast, and this is our first episode, so forgive all the fuck-ups. I'm Ian Bushfield, originally from Politicoast.
I'm Patrick Meehan, originally from Pod Keep Our Land.
I'm Erin Reddecup, originally from the Tipsy Archives.
On today's episode, we're going to do a bit of a backgrounder. What's the history of Vancouver? Why do we have political parties? Some of those basic questions so that we can always just refer back to episode 1. And then we're going to do a bit of a state of the race. Where is Vancouver at? Who are all these people running for council? What parties do they represent? What do those parties even mean? What does a nonpartisan association really mean? And why do we need to have a coalition, Vancouver, that's even less partisan than the nonpartisan association? But first, Patrick, why don't you try to explain what it is we do on October 20th when we go to vote?
Yeah, so Vancouver's electoral system, municipally, is fairly unique in municipal electoral systems in North America in that we have decided to combine the worst elements of first past the post with the worst elements of mixed member plurality. So what you do when you go to vote is you get 10 votes for council, and you have to vote for 10 different people. You get 1 vote for mayor, and you have to vote for one person. And then you get to vote for your parks board and your school board. And I'm not going to pretend to remember how many people are on each of those, but you get 1 vote for each of them. So I believe, if I recall correctly, there's approximately 27 different votes that you have to cast on that day. And usually there's going to be 2 or 3 bond allocation referendums as well that allows the city to issue a bond to pay for stuff.
So it gets very difficult to remember that many names because you have something like 50 people running for council at times.
Plus yeses or nos.
Plus all these yeses or nos, plus people running for parks board and school board. I guess the first question is, why do we have a park board and other cities don't?
Well, I mean, we do have, I don't know, I'm a fan of the park board. I think that some people say that there's too much democracy is the argument, which is what Newfoundland said when they voted to no longer have democracy in 1925. The prime minister at the time actually stood up in the legislature and said, I think we've had too much of democracy, and then voted to not have any for the next 20 years.
The park board did just try to ban balloons.
And belugas.
And
I thought it was belugas mating.
That too.
They want to ban all cetaceans, and they passed that, and they're now fighting that in the courts and
but
losing. But
I do think that the Parks Board has a valuable purpose in... Vancouver has more parks per capita than most other cities in Canada. Vancouver, there's a lot of elements to the management of those parks. The Parks Board is not an operational body. They're purely governance-based body. So they set broad goals and strategies and aims, and then the staff execute them. And I think that there's something to be said for that.
I guess if you can go out to parks all year round, you need somebody to manage them.
So we have the park board, we have the council. The school board, I know, interestingly... It's not really interesting, but actually extends over UBC. So
yes,
Vancouver...
Well, a lot of civic services extend into UBC, including garbage collection and whatnot, where UBC endowment lands will... the residents just simply have to pay for that process, and then they actually physically, in the UBC endowment lands, do get to vote for Parks Board, or for school board.
But they don't get to vote for council, they don't get to vote for park board.
No, nor do they have to pay the full property taxes, though. They only pay property taxes insofar as it pays for the services rendered, and so they have to pay taxes to pay for garbage collection and sewage maintenance and things like that, but literally nothing else.
It seems weird to me that would happen because they get affected by everything that
the whole UBC governance structure is wrong.
Yeah, because
everything about it is wrong. They don't have a municipal government to oversee them. They have to. They have an RCMP detachment that is not accountable to any local elected officials. It's everything about it is wrong.
They do get a little bit more freedom to design housing for students and those kind of things. They're not subject to Vancouver's municipal zoning quandary that I'm
to
sure
an
we'll
extent,
get into.
because UBC effectively is UBC is effectively the municipal government there. They're now legally able to set things like noise restrictions and whatnot, and they're able to set aside land for different purposes. But it's just a weird asterisk in our municipal structures.
That's basically going to be our entire show is here's the weird asterisks.
Vancouver is strange. UBC is what? Electoral District A?
Yes, electoral area A.
Okay, and so would the president of UBC then essentially be their mayor?
No, actually, electoral area A does get to elect a representative to the mayor's council in Metro Vancouver. And electoral area A isn't just UBC. It also includes Barnston Island on the Fraser River. It also includes an island off the coast of Bowen Island. It also includes a handful of other very small areas in the Lower Mainland, including areas, I believe, by Alouette Lake as well. But this may be farther into the weeds than a Vancouver political podcast needs to go.
Probably.
And we'll get into some of the other municipalities over the course of the next 10 months, probably. Vancouver, so like we said, has 27 people you have to elect. And I think it's this council specifically that if you go in there with 600,000 other people across Vancouver, if everyone voted, which will never happen, it's hard to know who these candidates are. And I think that's where political parties become hyper useful in this situation. People like to shit on political parties all the time, but it's a good umbrella to say, hey, these people roughly agree on the same set of policies and ideas. And that's the ideal of political parties. And at least at the municipal level, I think they've been a little less strict, for better or worse, than some of the federal ones.
Yeah, and for Vancouver listeners, it is fascinating that, I mean, I come from the Lower Mainland, and so to me, political parties have always existed at the municipal level. But for both of you, political parties, when you moved here, were this sort of, at a municipal level, were this sort of weird abnormality, right? And so the rest of Canada looks at political parties at the municipal level as being, laughably stupid.
But I mean, the first time that I had to vote here, and I was told I had to vote for 10 different people, I was just like, if it weren't for political parties, I would start being like, hey, you have a name that I like. And it would have been impossible to figure out what to do.
Which is also why if your last name on the ballot comes early in the alphabet, you're doing pretty well. There's a reason why the NPA, the top 3 candidates for the NPA to win election in the last election are named Affleck, Ball, and DeGeneva, because A, B, and D are high on the alphabet, which means that your average voter decides to vote for, I'm going to vote for 5 Vision, 1 Cope, and then I'll give, 3 votes to the NPA, and then you don't know any of the individuals, you just vote for the top 3 NPA candidates on the ballot.
And our ballots are listed alphabetically by surname, just for simplicity, I guess.
Yeah, and yet other jurisdictions that have, done some advancements have actually randomized the alphabet, for example. The famous California gubernatorial election, where they had something like 80 people run, they randomized the alphabet so it determined where it went. Other systems, you have multiple ballots. So you'll have some ballots where this candidate is the top of the ballot, and some candidates where that candidate is the bottom of the ballot. And it's random allotment who gets what.
I think that would be helpful too on websites where you're learning about different counselors or people running for city council, because you have a tendency to read the top 3 or 4 and then you sort of branch off. You're like, I don't know what the person whose last name who starts with Z stands for at all.
And all of their candidate write-ups talk about all of the local events they've been to, and they went to Italian Days on the Drive, and all of that. And they all read the same, so your eyes just glaze over, right?
And the system for the candidate's point of view is actually pretty terrible as well, because people will know my co-host on Politico, Scott, is running for a nomination for the NPA. That means he has to visit this entire city all of the time to convince everyone in every corner. Well, there are more friendly parts of the city for him, and there'll be more friendly parts of the city for like the one city candidates. But when it's an at-large system, you kind of need to go at large.
We did used to have wards. Wards were limited in the 30s out of a fear that the socialists would win a majority on council, so they changed the electoral math, which is a BC tradition. Is if you think the socialists are going to win, change the rules.
Well, but now the socialists at the provincial level are going to change the rules to help them win forever. If you listen to the Andrew Wilkinsons, but this isn't the provincial politics podcast. So.
I'm a big fan of wards. I find it so much easier. And I don't know, I also feel like with the ward system, you get somebody who actually is representing the needs of your community. Like if you have a different community than somebody who lives on the other side of your city.
Yeah, I would support a mixed system where you have half of your councillors elected by ward and half of your councillors not elected by ward but elected at large. So that as a voter, you vote for, say, 2 or 3 candidates. You vote for your ward candidate and then your at-large candidates. I think there's something to be said for city councillors that aren't beholden to their community. Mm-hmm. But I also think there is something to be said for, city councillors who are beholden to their community.
You mentioned the election of 1930, whatever, when Vancouver switched to the at-large system. And I think that's when you were saying the NPA started.
Yeah, so I think it was the early 30s, they eliminated the ward system in order to keep the socialists out. And then by 37, it was still looking like the socialists were going to win. And so the two political parties of the day, the Liberals and the Conservative Party, were squabbling so much that a group of businessmen came forward to solve the problem. And the group of businessmen came forward and they said, we're not partisan. We're neither liberal nor conservative. We're just anti-socialist. And so they ran as the Nonpartisan Association because to their mind, nonpartisan is not liberal or conservative, and socialists are not legitimate partisans.
And so the NPA has been surprisingly effective over its history. I know it's held the mayorship and majority on council multiple times, and I think people have even described it as one of the most successful political party machines in at least North American history, if not many other countries where parties seem to come and go.
It's staggering how many electoral wins the NPA has racked up in the last, I guess, 80 years since they were founded.
When was their last win?
The last one was 2005, when Sam Sullivan beat out the broken apart and conflicted left. The left had won election for the first time. COPE won their first ever election in 2002 and promptly fell apart. Because that's what the left does, is, as soon as you win, you immediately decide to fall apart. And so, yeah, the NPA has been out of office for longer than I think any other time, really, in their history. It's really interesting to see what's going on with them now.
Do you think that's because Vancouver politics are slowly shifting to the left, like rather to be center left rather than center right, or?
I think it's actually more that they got really into their own heads. I think that the NPA over the last 10 years, they fought 3 elections where they thought the number one issue was bike lanes and wheat fields. And the number one issue in reality was housing and daycare and other issues, like actual issues. But they fought 3 elections in a row, or they fought the 2014 election, they fought the 2011 election, and the 2008 election, all of them really over bike lanes. The 2008 election was the outlier because they did support some bike lanes in that one. But they really fought in a weird way on this like one issue campaign. And I think that they seem to be finally coming out of this like weird haze they were in where all they could say was bike lanes. And that might mean that seems to mean that they are a real force again.
And you mentioned, is Vancouver moving left? And I think yes is the answer on a social level for sure. We see Vancouverites voting for Liberals and New Democrats at the federal level and even mostly NDP at the provincial level now, except for some of the more affluent South ends. And I think it's that they're not the social conservatives anymore. And so any party that's appealing to that doesn't do as well as they used to. And if you look at the history of the NPA in recent history, they've kind of abandoned the social conservatism. They might not be the leaders on trans rights, for example, but they did do a lot in terms of going with harm reduction and introducing some of the 4 pillars approaches to health. Now, maybe they didn't go as far as many advocates in downtown East Side would call for, but they went farther than, a conservative mayor of Calgary at the same time might have. Although Calgary, I think I was mentioning earlier, often elects liberal mayors, but that's a weird situation.
Well, but also, I mean, the NPA had, I believe, the first openly gay city councillor in BC. If not Canada, and they had a number of people coming out of the neighborhood of the West End as well that were candidates and councillors for them for many years. Like Gordon Price is a classic example of the sort of the middle of the road person to come out and be a city councilor for the NPA for years. And so they didn't. I mean, I know I'm going to catch flack from this from my like hard left friends, but like the NPA when they were governing in the 90s and the 80s weren't all that far to the right. I think there were instances where they were, but I don't think that it was all that far.
I think how I best heard it described is Vancouver gets divided along this developer versus like social housing kind of approach. How much, or even before that, it was the developer versus union money. Where did you get more of your funding? And now at least all of that is out of local politics, thanks to the provincial government last fall, which will make this upcoming election interesting. But
well, I don't know if that's always been the case. I think Vancouver has been in a housing boom for 30 or 40 years, since before Expo. But what Vancouver did was Vancouver took a bunch of brownfield and redeveloped it. And so Vancouver decided to create Yaletown. And we built a pile of housing in Yaletown. And Vancouver decided to build the Olympic Village where, Aaron and I live. And they turned, empty fields into housing, massive housing, huge density. And they've done that a couple of times with all of the open land that they had. And I think about 10 years ago, when they finished building out the Olympic Village, they ran out of areas that no one else used. And so it was really easy to add a whole pile of people to Vancouver every year if you still have open land near your downtown core. Like the idea that in 1980, Yaletown was a bunch of brownfield was like all of Yaletown that we know of now was just a bunch of open fields with log booms in False Creek. And now 30,000 people live there. It became developer centric, and this partisanship or this fight between developer and community as soon as we ran out of free land and started having to figure out how to add more people still in land that people already lived in.
I won't say we're totally out of land. There is still a bit of the Northeast False Creek where the viaducts and that giant lot that Concord Pacific's been sitting on for.
Which most of that has to be park land, and also there's the Jericho development that's going to go in, which is going to add 10,000 people to Vancouver. But by and large, we've ran out of open land. And so now the pressure is on, and that means that people are having to see change in their communities. Whereas we managed to have suburban single-family development, 3 kilometers from downtown Vancouver. What city can say that they have that still? And we did it because we had empty land for it. And now people are angry because now we have to figure out how the next 10,000 people move in.
So that takes us through NPA with a few touches, but...
Yeah, so the NPA won a lot. And then in 2002, they finally lost to Cope, which Cope finally gets their first real win under Mayor Larry Campbell. Larry Campbell, the former head coroner of Vancouver, which I will say is a little weird, the idea that your head coroner becomes your mayor.
He knows where the bodies are buried.
I watch a lot of crime television. That's really normal.
And fascinatingly enough, the day that he became mayor, there was already 4 seasons of a TV show that revolved around his life on CBC at that point. Because CBC created a TV show called Da Vinci's Inquest that was based around his life. And then he becomes mayor in 2002, and Cope immediately falls apart. They break into Diet Cope, as it was known in the media, or Cope Light, which was Larry Campbell and what would become Vision, and it broke into the hardcore Cope, which was like Tim Lewis and fellows. And by 2005, Cope is a broken force. And so Vision has come out in 2005, where they compete the election under Jim Green, who was a longtime poverty advocate who passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. Jim Green is also the reason why, as an example, our manhole covers or our sewer covers in Vancouver have artistic designs on them, because Jim Green thought, why would we ever have boring sewer covers?
And actually goes farther than that, because a lot of them are trying to have Aboriginal artists because they want to make sure that we're respecting and showing the connection to the original people on the land and showing respect to the communities.
And so Jim Green then runs under the Vision banner in 2005. I don't believe that Cope ran a candidate in 2005. I believe that, if I recall correctly, that Cope and Vision came together for a power sharing agreement or a brokerage agreement. And ran against Sam Sullivan, who had been a longstanding city councilor, well-known person in the community. And an additional candidate ran in that election, and his name was James Green. And James Green got, if I recall correctly, 20,000 votes, which was close to the difference between what became Jim Green and Sam Sullivan.
And like we said earlier, with names being listed alphabetically by surname, you'd have Jim and James right
side by side.
At least James went first.
Well, absolutely, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so Sam Sullivan wins, and over the next 3 years, resides over some significant pro-developer activities, as well as some significant labor strife.
And the Vancouver Olympic bid.
Which had been actually begun several years prior to that by the Glenn Clark government. Oddly enough, Glenn Clark and the NDP in 98 brought about the Olympic bid. Fun fact. But yeah, Sam Sullivan was a very controversial mayor. One of the things that happened was during Sam's strike, as it became known, the Shangri-La building was approved against all of the height restriction rules that Vancouver had at the time. But it was approved in part because the strike was on, and the staff weren't in the office to be able to say no.
So we have that strike to thank for Trump Tower as well, since it, I think, also exceeds that same height restriction.
Yes, once you break the height restriction, it's gone forever, essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get it back. It's like union bargaining.
He got it. Why can't I get it?
Exactly.
So then 2008 comes around in the next election, so 3 years later after Sam Sullivan, and a number of people are planning on running for Vision because it was believed to be the party that would beat Sam. And Sam Sullivan was so disliked at that point. We forget how much he was disliked at that time because he's sort of reconsolidated himself as an MLA over the last bunch of years for Vancouver.
Well, and his weird, like, doing public salons
the
and
YouTube
public
videos that
and
he
the
has
urbanist
on the
videos.
history of Vancouver.
And he's just a character of the city
Yes.
now.
Yeah. Well, and he shows up to everything, too, which is really impressive.
I'm sure we'll get him on the podcast at some point because
So
we'll do that.
So 3 people ran for Vision Vancouver for the nomination for mayor in 2008. Al DeGeneva, which we'll get to later in terms of his daughter, who's now a city councilor for the NPA, who had been an NPA Parks Board representative but broke from them. Raymond Louie, who's a current city councilor, and Gregor Robertson, who at the time was a rookie MLA from the Cambie corridor in terms of for the NDP, who had really cut his teeth on fighting the BC Liberals over their decision to cut and cover the Canada Line and the damage that did to the businesses. Gregor Robertson stomped the mayoral nomination and became the mayoral candidate for Vision, which then cut a power sharing agreement in 2008 with both Cope and the Greens, where everybody got seats set aside for them. This is where Adrienne Carr starts to come forward. I don't think she won at that point yet. This is where Andrea Reimer comes forward. This is where a lot of the Vision team that we know of really comes together, coalesces.
Well, and it's worth maybe pausing there for a second. With the power sharing agreement highlights one of the features of Vancouver's electoral system that I don't think we touched on, which is it doesn't actually make sense for any one party to run a full slate. Like if you run,
absolutely.
If you run 10 people,
You dilute your brand.
Exactly.
Well, and people aren't also going to remember 10 people.
And there's even a mathematical effect where people will vote plump. So they'll only vote for 5 or 7 candidates that they know and like. And their votes then are actually a bit stronger because they're not voting for someone they only kind of like than someone who fills out their ballot. So if you fill out your ballot, your votes are diluted.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you saw in 2008 was Vision stopped. Vision had 8 seats set aside for them. Cope had 2 seats set aside for them. And the NPA only won the 1 seat. And this was the weird election because Gregor Robertson and Peter Ladner, who's now with the Suzuki Foundation and has written books on farm to table and agricultural revolutions that you can have within a city. Peter Ladner is a fantastic person. He ran on a platform of massively expanding bike lanes in Vancouver under the NPA banner. And it was the only election we've ever had where the 2 major parties were fighting over who was going to build more bike lanes. And then everything went dark.
Because nobody liked bike lanes?
Well, this was when the Burrard Bridge bike lane was being really pushed forward.
Oh, okay.
And it even only just became a full reality. It was just a pilot for so long, but...
Well, and it had been a failed pilot initially, too, because in 2003, I think it was, they attempted a pilot for the Burrard Bridge bike lane, and it failed. It was poorly designed, first of all, but also talk radio and people got really livid about it, and it didn't even last for the duration the trial was supposed to last. It was supposed to be, I think, a 6-month trial, and I think they pulled it after 3 months.
So do people hate it more than the Hornby ones? Because I remember there being people in arms over Hornby.
But I think the thing is that every time you take away a lane for bikes, there's less uproar than there was before. Like for the one before that. And so you had the first time they tried Burrard, it failed miserably. Everyone was upset about it. And then they tried it again, and it's never going to get pulled out again, as far as I can tell.
Well, they just rebuilt the bridge and intersections around bike lanes.
Yeah.
And it's safer for everyone now. But basically what I think you're sort of highlighting, that idea of it going to fewer and fewer people, is it was half the city. Now it's like 5 cranky old people.
Yeah. Which is much better.
And then in 2008, the other thing that I really want to highlight, in 2008, the candidate that came one off from getting elected was Kashmir Dhaliwal. Vancouver has never had an Indo-Canadian or a South Asian elected to council. And this is a real racial problem. We have South Asian candidates, whether they run for a left party or a right party or a center party, get less votes than anybody else running for those parties. And that you don't see that with East Asian communities. You don't see that with Filipino communities. You see that this South Asian community, which is a huge percentage of Vancouver's population, doesn't get elected. And that is one of the reasons why I generally vote for South Asian candidates every chance I get.
Well, and they get elected at other offices.
Yeah,
we have
they absolutely do.
Harjit Sajjan from South Vancouver, and we have
South Vancouver has consistently had a South Asian elected to it, or an East Asian like Wei Young. South Vancouver had Ujjal Dosanjh before that, and Herb Dhaliwal before that. And so you have these ridings where you do get elected, but because of the at-large system and whatever other reason, South Asian candidates are at a real disadvantage in Vancouver.
I don't think we actually said earlier that COPE stands for the Coalition of Progressive Electors as well.
As opposed to coping with defeat.
I don't think we need to get into Team, who were...
Team in the 60s
they
and the
won a
70s were
couple
quite
60s or
strong, as well as
70s.
in the 80s a little bit. But Team really was the centrist attempt to break the NPA. And they tried to, similar to what Vision eventually did, which was sort of exactly that model.
And so now we're seeing Vision kind of collapse, and COPE is still floating
possibly.
around.
Vision might collapse. Remember, Vision has a lot of money in the bank and some extremely talented staff. They're some of the best municipal staff you could ask for are still working with Vision. And so I think that the rumors of Vision's demise are quite premature at this point.
We're not seeing people step up to run for their council
Or
possibilities
anything.
or anything.
Well, there's a huge turnover in Vision councillors.
We're also still really early.
Yeah.
We're in March. Oftentimes these things don't get decided until once you hit the summer. And so we'll see. But it is concerning. If I were a Vision, and I have voted Vision consistently in my life, as I've voted for a couple of COPE candidates, a couple of NPA candidates here and there. If I were a real Vision person, like a senior person in Vision, I'm worried, but I also know I have a pile of money in the bank, more than any other party. Mm-hmm. I also know that I have a bunch of staff that are dyed-in-the-wool dedicated. So I think they can I think they're going to find a way to make it work.
At the same time, we are seeing the rise of alternatives. So the new alternative is this One City Vancouver, which is trying, I think, in one way to be
which
the new COPE. Almost.
For the 2015 election, when everyone thought Vision was dead again. Because remember, everyone thought Vision was dead in 2015. Everyone thought they were dead in the water. Kirk LaPointe was going to be the mayor, and that Vision was going to have a bloodbath. But they managed to pull through again. RJ Aquino was their city councilor candidate in that election, and they had a number of school board candidates, one as well as, I think, Parks Board. And One City was this breakaway from COPE, which is fascinating because Vision is a breakaway from COPE. And so what COPE does is COPE loses elections and creates political parties that win.
As the less politically knowledgeable person, I always think of One City as breaking out into a song. I feel like they should have a pop band.
They're a British group, actually.
Yeah.
We were saying earlier, we're both from Alberta, me and Aaron, and there's this weird tradition of theme songs of Alberta politicians. It's usually country music, but
they're amazing, and you can find them on YouTube. And it's
the
just
Ted Morton
here.
song specifically.
The Ted Morton song
Ted Morton is the
literally
man.
classic. Yes. But we don't have any of that jingle
it's not a
stuff in
BC
Vancouver,
thing as much. I was trying to look up good tunes to use for this podcast.
Philip Owen, I'm sure, had a tune. Oh, and Van der Zam, obviously, because...
You can learn the history of a candidate by their song, though.
Tells you a lot about a candidate.
But I guess we got to 2008, where Vision dominates, where they had an agreement with COPE, where COPE didn't run a mayoral candidate, and then COPE ran a number of council candidates. And I think we're actually... The reason why that's important is I think we're going to see something... We could see something like that happen. We're already seeing the Greens and COPE in One City come together, and I think that they will eventually have to or should invite Vision into that tent. We'll see. But they do that, and then 2011 election comes around, and again, it's another stomping ground. The NPA runs an extremely regressive campaign. They basically said they were going to tear up all the bike lanes. Suzanne Anton was the mayoral candidate who went on to become Attorney General under the failed Christy Clark government, the 4-year Christy Clark government. And you also saw, this was an election where Suzanne Anton and the NPA hired somebody to dress in a chicken suit and go to every single Vision announcement and dance around in a chicken suit.
Classy politics.
Yeah, this was
classic.
This was the ugliest that politics gets. This was really dark politics, and it didn't succeed at all, which I think is great. And 10 years later, it probably would have succeeded.
Yeah, well, especially if you're in the States.
Trump never even had hired anyone to go dance at Clinton rallies.
Oh,
But
it was ugly. It was really ugly. And it's demeaning. It demeans the political party that hires the person. It demeans the political party that it's employed against. Because if you're a staffer and you've got a chicken following you around...
It demeans the voter.
And it demeans the voter. It's I don't know. I was very disappointed in that election. I still voted for two NPA candidates in that election. I voted for, if I recall correctly, Sean Bickerton and I believe one other one that I quite liked. But like that was a tough one.
And then the other party we haven't really mentioned are the Greens, who sort of arose.
Which in
on the other,
2011, Adrian Carr gets elected.
Well, and this past by-election, everyone they put up for school board won and got the highest votes, which demonstrated some thirst for the Greens, maybe?
After only having won one seat on school board. And that's fascinating to me.
It's one of those places where they strategically went, we're only going to run 3 because we don't think we can do that well. But they should have run 6 or something.
So Adrian Carr wins in 2011, is the first Green on council. Now, Andrea Reimer, who is a Vision City Councillor, had been the first Green elected in Canada when she was elected to Parks Board in the early 2000s. But nobody had been elected other than NPA and Vision, essentially, for political parties in Vancouver in a while.
Well, and it just makes sense to vote for a Green for Park Board. It just seems
that's
right?
That seems like an easy...
Why wouldn't you vote for the Greens there?
And so now you've got 2011, so 7 years ago now, you've got Adrian Carr in office. The Greens are a real force. Cope gets essentially... Cope is falling apart at this point, starting to falling apart. They still have Ellen Woodsworth elected, if I recall correctly, and I believe they still had Tim Lewis elected, but they didn't have anybody else, and they didn't do very well. And then 3 years later, we get to 2014, which is when Kirk Lapointe, from the former Global Mail editor, runs for mayor for the NPA. Gregor Robertson again runs for a third time. Now, Vancouver doesn't traditionally have mayors win a third time, and so this was historic. The Cope fell apart in that election massively, completely collapsed. And the Greens, again, Adrian Carr goes from getting in as a councillor to topping the ballot in 2015 as the top council winner. And the Vision again wins. RJ Aquino runs for council for one city in 2014, loses, but not by very much, and that's of worth noting. And I believe he beat out Cope for votes, any Cope candidate.
And RJ's up for seeking the one city.
And RJ, if one city has any brains at all, they'll run RJ as one of their candidates. I have to assume he'll be a candidate. And so in 2014, all of this happens. This sort of Gregor Robertson, 2 weeks before the election, famously apologizes to the voters for the way that Vision has been aloof and arrogant, and the voters buy into it. Also, the NPA again runs a car-centric anti-bike campaign and lose. And so the moral of the story is stop running anti-bike campaigns.
Stop running people who should run in the suburbs in Vancouver.
Yeah. Just
which is not a suburb anymore.
Just because your message does well in Dunbar doesn't mean it's going to do well on Main Street or in Strathcona or on Renfrew or literally anywhere other than Dunbar.
Well, which is another thing that makes it harder when you have to run somebody that appeals to the whole city.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and Kirk Lapointe, I think, appealed somewhat. He most famously in that election called for counterflow lanes on major arterials, similar to what you have on the Lionsgate Bridge. Mm-hmm. He wanted Granville Street and Broadway Street to have a lane that would go one way during the morning and one way during the afternoon.
I mean, that's one solution.
And Adrian Carr in that election came up with 2 platform points that I want to highlight because I think that it's really important to note that the Greens are not necessarily all that environmentally friendly or urbanist. Not that urbanism is necessarily the environmentally friendly utopia that some of the more housing people say it is. But she floated 2 ideas. One, she floated barring bikes from certain roads, which bicycles being barred from certain roads you could consider to be a little bit of a stupid idea. Also
really hard to enforce.
Yes. Yeah. She also suggested, and this one gets to like a really bizarre core, she suggested in that election that there should be a limit to how many laneway houses can be added to one lane.
Why?
Well, she said that it was becoming out of control. That there were 4 or 5 or 6 laneway houses in a lane.
So?
There's been some connection between just like the things the Greens once elected vote for and not wanting other things in your
backyard.
There you go.
But the thing that gets me with that the most is that, to my mind, Where in our legal system do we ever say you can't do something because your neighbor already did it? Sorry. People are allowed to do this, but only so many, and then we don't allow it legally anymore.
We have lots of things we license for, so like hunting. Like,
I guess
there's
for
like
licenses,
rations. You ration something.
Absolutely. You only get so many tags for moose and stuff like that, I guess.
And laneway houses are the moose of Vancouver.
Oh my God, it's running at my bus stop.
But yeah, so that election was fascinating in that it was, I think, you could consider it potentially Vision's last gasp, where they did one last grasp and held on. The NPA, I think, hopefully have learned that lesson, that they can't fight that regressive campaign again. One city proved that they were a legitimate party. Cope proved that they really weren't. And Cedar Party, which existed for a brief flash and have got resubsumed into the NPA, proved that they had no merit. The Cedar Party was a very anti-any density party that had, I think Mustangs, like cars, as their their vehicle that they would drive to events. And so that was the thing. And then over the last 4 years, some changes have happened. 1, elections are no longer every 3 years, they're every 4.
2, there's not corporate and union donations at the municipal level.
That's huge.
Although there was in the by-election, which I think Vision used to kind of stock up the coffers as they kind of threw it.
Yeah.
We know we can't
Vision raised piles of money in the by-election and spent nothing.
Yeah.
So there was a by-election earlier this year, or last year? Was it last year?
It was last year.
Last year,
Yes,
where...
2018 now.
Yeah, where Vision ran Diego Cardona. I believe he was 22-year-old local community activist.
Colombian refugee.
Yeah, Colombian refugee. And looking at
Great story.
Looking at his history, I
guy.
feel really unaccomplished.
Yeah.
Like a great candidate. But he came in, I think, 4th or 5th.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You had the NPA ran Hector Bremner, who now is a force, who's running for mayor of the NPA. Potentially. He's running for nomination. And what else? Cope contested the election, but didn't do well.
Cope nominated Jean Swanson, who ran as an independent, because she generated a grassroots campaign for her. Mm-hmm. And you very rarely see an independent come forward at this level.
Well, in researching for this podcast, Jean Swanson led Cope in 1988 election. I was 3 years old. I was pretty. It's pretty stunning when you go through the history of the different parties, because you see things like Cope gets back on the scene with young with young Parks Board Representative Spencer Herbert, who is now Spencer Chandler Herbert, an MLA in the legislature. You see things like all that all through these histories. This is the brewing ground. This is the breeding ground of future MLAs and MPs and so
on. Premiers.
And even. Premiers. Mm-hmm. I mean, two of our recent premiers were Vancouver mayors. Both Gordon Campbell and Mike Harcourt were mayor of Vancouver, and Christy Clark ran for mayor of Vancouver, or ran for the NPA nomination against Sam Sullivan in 2008.
So we were talking about the by-election. You had Jean Swanson as independent, I think came in second, and you had Judy Graves run for one city.
A very identical campaign,
on a very similar platform. Mm-hmm. Jean had a very 3 bullet point, mansion tax, rent freeze. I forget what the third one. Just build affordable housing or something. Yeah. Expropriate land. Kind of a socialist kind of.
She had a press conference in front of Chip Wilson's home.
That was
where she had a giant bill,
handmade
bill of how much he owed he would owe in taxes. And it's really easy to vilify Chip Wilson because he's kind of a movie villain.
Yeah. So Judy Graves ran on the less caricaturable version of that and came in just behind, which...
And so the two of them combined for almost double Hector Bremner's vote.
Then you also had Pete Fry run for the Greens, who came in very close as well.
Pete Fry also ran in 2015 election and did respectably. Pete Fry will, I assume, reprise his role as a council candidate for the Greens. And Pete Fry is a really, really vote-forable candidate. He's a smart guy. He thinks that he knows the issues. He's done the homework and he's done his time. Pete Fry is going to be a really interesting one because the Greens could really break through this election.
I have a question about the Greens. Do you think that the increase in the popularity of Greens provincially will impact them municipally?
It's a complicated question because the Green support is on the island provincially, not necessarily Vancouver. So yeah, you've got a really good question there, and I think that could very well be the case.
I think one thing it does is it makes the Greens look respectable, like a real party. They're not just fringe protest
and they're not just Adrian Carr.
Yeah,
Because I think you could say, prior to this last provincial election, that the Green Party in Vancouver was just the Adrian Carr party.
Yeah, well, and I think having them do well, even though it's on the island, like, not only does it raise the profile, but it raises people's notice of them. Like, and I think, especially in a system where you have to vote for 10 people, if you recognize that the Green Party is a powerful party in somewhat, then you're more likely to vote for them because you're more likely to see something get done.
Yeah.
And we saw that in November when the Green candidates for school board took like 5,000 more votes or something absurd than the next runner-up.
And I thought they would do poorly because I thought that Janet Fraser had done a particularly poor job of being a school board representative under the previous school board.
And now she's chair.
And now she's chair of the school board. Yeah, the ascendancy of the Greens is really interesting. Now, it should be noted, they're not a lefty party. They're not a progressive left party. They are, in theory, an environmentally friendly party that also has very pro-business background. And so they're an interesting party. They're sort of filling a void that a sensible right-wing party should be able to dominate.
So we're moving into this discussion of where the state of the race is at in advance of this election. And as I pointed out in the trailer, and as you can find on my Twitter feed, I've kept this ongoing Google spreadsheet of everyone who said they're running for something.
That list is amazing, by the way.
Yeah. And
thank you for putting that together.
I just kind of felt I had to. And it was also, full disclosure, obviously a way to help promote this podcast.
Yes.
Because then it gets more attention to me and all the Van Poly people are looking at me. And then it's like, hey, also, here's a podcast. But what I've noticed easily on there is there's a ton of excitement for the NPA. There's so many people running for that, and we'll come to that in a second. But the other thing that's starting to crop up is a lot of people are putting their name forward for Green for council. There's almost as many.
Really?
This past weekend when the Greens had their AGM, which was actually right before that COPE Unity meeting, ironically. It was like a day of Vancouver politics that we just didn't cover. But the Greens had a whole bunch of people come forward. So in addition to Adrian Carr and Pete Fry, who have said they are running, there's Sung Wong and David Wong and Michael Weeb and Francois Renault and Adam Abrams.
Michael Weeb is the current Parks Board Commissioner for the Greens. Is he going to run for council?
Yeah, and so he's
interesting.
He put his name forward at the AGM.
He's a really respectable guy. There is one thing I will note, though, about those names, and you did name some, obviously, but you've got the Greens tend to be a bit of an affluent white party. They do have, people of color, and they do have, and I'm not saying that they're like a whitewash party, but I think that is a real issue that they're going to have to overcome is how do they appeal to people in Strathcona? And I think that's a question because they can get a wedge number of voters in Dunbar, the environmental friendly people. They can get a substantial number of people in Cambie, like the Cambie corridor, Kitsilano, even the West End and Yaletown, sure. But how do they get Killarney? How do they get voters in places like Strathcona and Killarney and Marpole? It's gonna be curious.
Well, and the other thing the Greens announced at their AGM is someone put forward a motion and it passed very strongly that they will run Adrian Carr as their mayoral candidate.
If she wants to.
Well, she said, I haven't decided if I want to do that yet.
Well,
because
honestly,
they're still in the negotiations with COPE and with One
and
City.
I'm sure that they're having conversations with Vision.
Yeah.
Like, I know that the meeting that occurred was only COPE, Green, and One City, but I'm sure that there are informal or formal talks going on with Vision as well.
Well, I know the Vancouver District Labour Council is planning a big, we want to bring all of these, including Vision, together. And I know some of my more leftist friends who are like, that's terrible. Vision shouldn't be there.
Vision has such a toxic brand. And it's weird to me that Vision, whom I don't think have done much wrong. I think that they've not done enough right, but I don't think they've done that much wrong.
Well, I think Vision's biggest problem is the marketing side of it, is that they promised these huge promises. And so even though they did a really good job in making those problems better, we still have a huge housing problem. We still have a huge home. Yeah.
They literally said, I will end homelessness.
Yeah. And so it's like, you cannot promise more than you can achieve. Yeah. And that is one of the biggest failings of Vision, is they promise too much.
That's kind of a general failing of democracy, though. To win, you need to promise the sky.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that political parties are, elections are weird. Everyone gets a little bit screwball during elections. Is you had the BC Liberals chose not to make too many promises in the 96 election because they thought they were cruising to victory. So they didn't make too many promises because they didn't want to be held to too much. And then they lost. And so in 2001, they made every promise under the sun, including eliminating photo radar, among other stupid ideas. And they had to follow through with it. And you have political parties do that regularly, where they try not to promise. The BC NDP tried not to promise anything in 2013 because they thought they had that election in the bag. And then that happened. And
then
so,
this last one, they promised getting rid of tolls and cutting MSP.
Because they knew they wanted to win, right? And so, I don't know, I think when you're out of office, you make promises you can't necessarily deliver on. The federal Liberals are the classic example in 2015, where they promised everything in the world. But it is true that you can hold them against that, right?
Yeah, well, and it's almost like the biggest thing you have to achieve in politics in general is making the promises and what you can achieve balance.
Yeah. Or at least being able to say that, we didn't do that, but, we did this.
Yeah. Or this new problem arose, too. Because, you couldn't have foreseen a fentanyl crisis necessarily.
Well, and I don't think in 2008 you could foresee the housing crisis getting as bad as it has.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone in 2008 thought it was going to get to the point that it has gotten to now.
Well, and if you can pull up graphs, I think a lot of the worst of it's just come in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably an exponential type curve where things are getting a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And then suddenly, things have doubled in times they shouldn't do. So that's where the bubble starts to pop up. But
yeah, so vision is hated by a lot of people. And I don't think necessarily rightly, which means that if an organization is hated for ephemeral reasons, there's a general feeling that they're not doing well. That can translate into an electoral destruction. Mm-hmm. Or you can easily, come out of that and really fly your way as a phoenix, which Christy Clark did in 2013. Mm-hmm. Right? Everyone hated that brand. Everyone hated the Liberals. They were polling in the 20% range, 25% range. And Christy Clark smiled, put on a hard hat, and went to every event she could, and she won that election, right? She won that election more than Adrian Dix lost it. As much as Adrian Dix did also lose that election. But I think vision could come back based on that.
Well, when you have a new person, provided they get a candidate for mayor,
That's the question, right? When you have a new person, which they may not,
there is the ability to say, "Well, I'm a new person, and I'm taking us in a new direction, or I'm going to lead us and do something different."
Which is exactly what Christy Clark did in 2013. It is exactly what Glenn Clark did in 1996. Also, too many people are named Clark in our elections.
It confuses me.
So let's call it the achievement gap between Vision's promises and their deliverables. Mm-hmm. It seems big for many people, and that's created a vacuum of sort of people have been dropping off the Vision slate. Most of the councillors are saying, we're not going to run again.
Well, I think a lot of them, you look at
and they have been around for a while. So
they've been around for a while, or they've gotten jobs in Victoria, like Jeff Meggs jumped off Victoria. Yeah. I think a lot of them, it is, it's a change election. It's really clearly a change election. Even the NPA candidates who should be smelling victory in the water are backing off, right? You've got George Affleck, who could be the leader of council. He's not running again, right? And so I think everyone has sensed this is a change election.
Well, and that's where I wanted to bring it to is there is this new focus almost of the NPA. Like you mentioned, they've spent several of the last elections going after bike lanes or trying to turn Vancouver back. And now, following Hector Bremner's win in that by-election, which I think he sees as vindication of the message he ran on, which is essentially, let's blanket rezone the city and let developers go wild, and magically the housing crisis will be solved because supply.
Well, and I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of that position.
I'm just afraid of it.
I'm not afraid of it. I think that single family housing is a mechanism, is preserving. It is, I think, accurate to say that preserving single family housing and requiring that an area stay single family housing makes it housing for the affluent, and that it's no longer accessible to people that are not affluent.
I agree with that, but what more I'm afraid of is the real pro-development stance and the idea of bringing in developers to solve the problem.
Yeah, there's something there, right?
Because that's part of the problem right now.
And he's developed from that by-election the brand #Let's Fix Housing. You can see every one of the NPA candidates now pretty much, except for Glenn Chernin, who's trying to represent the Cedar Party back in, like you mentioned, the anti-bike lane party. Maybe not quite. That may not be fair to him, but
there has been a simmering battle within the NPA. I've been referring to it, and I'm an outsider to this. I don't know it. I've been referring to it as the NPA civil war for a number of years now, and I think that there has been a civil war in there. Is you have George Affleck and Elizabeth Ball very much come from a background of the Dunbar Suzanne Anton NPA. Melissa DeGeneva, I feel, has been caught in between the two of them. She's the other counselor. Her dad ran for the Vision nomination for mayor against Garrett Robertson, and she has become an NPA counselor all in her own right, and actually has done. She's a fairly accomplished counselor who I disagree with on most things. But I think she's been torn between these two sides. Then you get Erin Shum on Parks Board, who is now sitting as an independent because of what she considers bullying from what you could only describe as the gray hairs of the NPA, which is the older, white, West Side NPA members. And Erin Shum and her partner, Gavin Dew being a longtime BC Liberal, longtime right-of-center political type person. They're all fighting with Hector Bremner, potentially, although I think there's multiple sectors here, to try to get rid of this old guard of the NPA. And it's interesting to see it happen. And I don't know who's going to win yet.
Well, and you even see this playing out in the media. You see Gregory Baker, I think, is the president of the NPA.
The son of Jonathan Baker, who was the NPA candidate for mayor in the 90s.
So you see Greg in the media frequently. And so the basic way of normal a healthy, let's say, political party works is you have the candidates and they're the public face, but then you have this internal bureaucracy to manage things. And that's where your presidents and your chairs, and they try not to take public stances that could alienate potential candidates. I've seen Gregory Baker take some pretty strong stances and even go after people like Adrian Crook, who's one of the NPA counselors now, saying, "You're not running for us yet."
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Was Hector Bremner announced he was running for mayor, which you're more than welcome to. And then shortly after, Adrian Crook, who is a friend of mine, and I know I quite respect the man.
He's the 5 Kids, 1 Condo?
The 5 Kids, 1 Condo.
Okay.
Really, really neat story there. He announced he was running for the NPA nomination. And I think there were some mistakes that were made in his announcement. I think, for example, he should have said outright in the announcement that he was running for the nomination for the NPA, and he didn't. But he hadn't pre-cleared himself with the party. Now, that is a faux pas. You should pre-clear yourself with the party. But also the party should very quietly tell you that and then sort it out behind closed doors. And like you said...
Not in the pages of the Georgia Straight.
It looks bad for everybody.
Yeah.
Because it makes the party...
everybody look bad. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it makes the party look disorganized because you're like, oh, you don't know who's running for you?
So everyone's coming out of the woodwork to run for the Greens. Everyone's coming out of the woodwork to run for the NPA.
And most of these NPA people are sort of following on the Hector Bremner housing style. Yeah. That's what Scott's doing. That's what
there's I don't want to say abundant housing movement because I think that Abundant Housing Vancouver is an organization that I believe, because I'm a tacit supporter of it, is an organization that is multi-partisan or bipartisan or whatever you want to call it.
And the organization itself is nonpartisan.
Yeah, but it is true that a lot of their people are coming out for the NPA. And that is, I think, something that organization is going to have to really look at deep down.
Brandon, I think, came from there and he's going to One City.
Oh, Brandon Yan. Brandon Yan. No, Brandon Yan... these are all old friends of mine. Brandon Yan is,
That's why we have you on the show.
Brandon Yan is, I think, a supporter broadly of abundant housing. He's never been a founder. I think he views a lot of more social justice element things as being his priority, rightly so, I think, in my mind. But Brandon Yan is also sort of support. That is a fascinating thing I will say about this millennial movement, is that there are a bunch of young people running for different parties, and they're all friends. Like Adrian Crook and Scott DeLangboom and Brandon Yan and Tanya Paz and a few others we all know each other. Like, they all know each other. They're all friendly with each other. They all chat with each other on Twitter. Like, you can see their back and forths. And you would never see a friendly back and forth between Andrew Reimer and George Affleck.
Well, and it is really cool to see this movement of under 40s running for council.
Yep.
And a lot of people. And it's exciting, even if, I disagree with policy on some of them and others. Like looking at Christine Boyle, for example, I want to bring her up. She's one of the ones, I think she was the first to announce for the One City nomination. She's a former United Church pastor, or maybe still, But she's really put together this strong message on Twitter and really reaching out. And I think she got a good column in the Tyee, their Straight, saying Vancouver has lost its soul. And so she talks a bit about the importance of housing, but also in making sure that it's not just towers built by Beatty and other developers. And
oh yeah, and she's talking. I think I read that article, and it's like, you need public art, and you need to have community centers, and because you need to have people brought together in order to build a city.
And so I'm really excited about the way she's going forward, but this whole election is really interesting and exciting.
It feels open.
Yeah.
It feels an open season. It feels like anyone could win.
And it feels fresh, too. Like, it feels like there's a bunch of new ideas coming out. And I mean, like, you cannot fight a Vancouver election without talking about housing. But it feels like that there's fresh outlooks on it, too.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming to a good natural close. I think we're on a good, upbeat, enthusiastic, optimistic note, which is where you probably want to stop talking, or else you'll get depressed if you talk about housing too much in the city. Either depressed or very angry and partisan. Hint, stay off of #VanRE, right?
Oh, I just post a #VanRE. I never look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Do people look at it?
I don't know.
I hope not.
Yeah. But let's end with a little look at where the mayor race is, because it's very up in the air. Mm-hmm. So we mentioned Hector Bremner is seeking that NPA nomination. We mentioned Glenn Chernin, who was the Cedar Party and is now back in the NPA, is representing maybe the older guard of the NPA. Outside of that...
Well, Adrian Carr potentially.
And Adrian Carr potentially. But outside of that, all we really have is a whole bunch of people who've said no.
Yeah. Don Davies said no.
Don Davies said no. Libby Davies has said no.
Libby Davies, no relation, said no.
Well,
it's not uncommon for established MPs or MLAs to be speculated about and then say no. Often they'll pull together 3 or 4 staffers that they trust or people that they trust and say, can you do a study for me? Like study this for me and tell me. And then they'll get a report and say no. Oh, or they get a report saying, well, maybe. And if you're Spencer Chandler Herbert and you're in government and you're a senior MLA in the caucus who is actually managing some important files in terms of like committee stuff, of course you want to stay there. You're doing good work.
With the very razor thin balance of seats, you'd look like such an ass.
Oh yeah.
If you resign.
Well, I mean his seat is likely a fairly safe.
It's safe, but you still have to make John Horgan then do I'm immediately calling a by-election to get another...
After he waited a bunch of... Yeah, okay.
After he waited. So because he would immediately call it, right? Yep. Because politics.
And you also sort of feel like you have a responsibility because you were elected and it's like such a small margin too.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of politicians who've gotten elected and then said no. Like Jim Prentice, I think most recently was a pretty good one where he got elected in 2015, but resigned before the votes had finished counting in his seat because he went,
because
I'm only here to be premier.
Yeah.
But
it's not uncommon to have a bunch of people bow out. What is uncommon is to not yet have the scrappy young person. Like Hector Bremner is the scrappy young person in the NPA. He is the scrappy young person who's come forward and said, I want to be mayor for this party. You oftentimes get that you want to be the early mover, scrappy young person, the Nikki Ashton or the Hector Bremner, and we haven't seen that yet for anybody because I think everyone's waiting for an agreement.
Yeah,
they need that. Vision is going to work with everybody, and everybody's going to have a joint. And so we'll see what comes of it. It's really fascinating that there isn't anybody yet announced or interested.
I really want to see a young female candidate.
Oh, Vision has to run a woman for mayor.
Yeah.
Vancouver has never had a woman as mayor.
No, and if Vision is going to run a candidate for mayor under a Vision banner, it has to be, to my mind, it has to be a woman. Vision has never run a woman for mayor. Vision has run 2 people for mayor. They've run Jim Green and Gregor Robertson. They need to run a woman at this point. The NPA have run a woman for mayor. Cope has, I believe, run a woman for mayor.
One city just actually announced its equity policy where they're going to run an equal male and female slate and make sure there are a significant number of people of color and other minorities in there, which is... they're already on that with their people coming forward.
I hazard to say whether that's progress. But I think that you can always because everyone has always picks your... people, your people to tick those boxes, right?
Sure.
But I think that it is probably progress because it's putting it in writing. But I will say...
It's a big debate we can have.
Yeah. But I will say Vision had better run a woman for mayor if they're going to run somebody. And I don't know who it'll be. I really wanted it to be Andrew Reimer, and I guess I've lost that vote.
Yeah.
And it probably won't be Heather Deal at this point.
No,
I don't think so.
Well, that'll be the ongoing story of this podcast. Who's going to run against? Probably Hector Bremner.
Yeah.
I would not count out somebody else coming forward for the NPA. But it is interesting to note, though, that today is the cutoff date to get a membership in one city to vote for their candidacy. And so I would normally say take out a membership in the political party to get your say, but you're not going to be able to. But take out, if you're interested in the NPA or Vision or Greens
or Cope
because they still exist in a vestigial form. Take out a membership and get involved because cutting your teeth in a municipal election is the most weirdest fun thing you can do.
There's also tinier parties that we're not even going to mention today, but we will probably at some point. Like your political party, Brett Mullins is going to run for mayor.
Oh, don't even get me started.
Watermelon's going to probably run again.
Is that rumored?
I don't know. I'm making up that up a rumor now.
I hope so.
Fantastic.
Oh.
Well, municipal politics is also one of the easiest ones to get involved with because it is the stuff that happens day to day in your community.
Yeah, and it's your garbage collection.
Yeah, it's the stuff that legitimately affects you every day.
And the mayor matters for that. Like, Sam Sullivan had a strike where garbage was not collected for 3 months.
Yeah.
Rob Ford got elected in Toronto. Obviously, civic politics matter. We're lucky we haven't amalgamated. So
I had a moment today where I forgot he was mayor.
Oh.
That must have been an interesting world.
It was so nice.
Yeah, he was elected, I think in the same year, Naheed Nenshi got elected in Calgary.
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's right, because there were jokes about that.
Yeah, and then Iveson was not long after, too. Yeah.
Well, this has been Cambie Report. You can find us on all the places on the internet. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you to the 5 people, I guess including myself technically, who have already left us.
Did you leave a 5-star review for us?
Did you not leave us a 5-star review?
That feels disingenuous.
Do you think you're awesome?
Yes.
Then you should leave yourself a review.
All right, so there's going to be 6 people that have left a 5-star review soon.
And leave some text. Mine literally said, I'm one of the hosts, and this is going to be good. But everyone else listening should leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. If you're too lazy to use an iPhone or download iTunes and do it, at least put it on Facebook or somewhere. Just retweet us.
Or create several accounts and auto-download our podcast.
Sure.
We're also on Twitter at Cambie Report. We're on Facebook, Cambie Report. And you can email us your thoughts, suggestions, what you want to hear, cambiereport@gmail.com.
If I could jump in, I want to say, email us, send us a message, connect with any one of us. This is the very, very beginnings of a podcast that we plan on running for the duration of the municipal elections. We will take any advice that we can get or any interest or input or thoughts that you have.
Emails are really great when you're running a podcast because then you know what you want, like what people want to hear.
And Erin, where can people find your podcast?
We are at the Tipsy Archives. We are a podcast that now soberly talks about all different kinds of history. And you can follow me on Twitter at Redicopter if you like memes about cats.
Thanks for joining us this week, Erin.
Thanks.